Mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the late start. We are so excited to have you all with us this afternoon. Thank you for joining the Community Orchard Network for our third meeting on urban orchards. My name is Sarah Anderson. I'm Program Director at Alliance for Community Trees, and I will be today's moderator. We are here today to talk about community orchards and food forest programs and to provide an open dialogue on everything that encompasses. So, whether you're a seasoned practitioner or want to find out if you should explore fruit and nut trees, we hope you find this as a valuable resource for new ideas. This open forum will be run through a Google group, which you all will be added to if you're not in the group already. This is where you can post questions and resources and find out about future meetings. If you know of anyone who might want to join the group, they can contact us at orchard@actrees.org. Today's meeting will be structured as follows. First, a quick look into who's participating today. Our first speaker, Marla Emery, is a research geographer with the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station, and she will discuss the intersection of urban foraging and public policy. Our second speaker, Rose Schmakowski, is the founder of Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh, and she'll offer insight on how to connect private tree owners with volunteer foragers and how to distribute harvested food. This webcast will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be posted in the Google group later on this week. We also want to keep this interactive, so please use the question box to ask our speakers questions and the chat box on the bottom panel throughout the webcast to make comments. Our first speaker is Dr. Marla R. Emery. She is a research geographer with the U.S. Forest Service Northern Research Station, where her research focuses on the role of forests in providing food and sustaining cultures in rural to urban environments, with particular emphasis on First Americans and New Americans. Her recent work focuses on human foraging in cities, including in New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. Marla is National Coordinator for the U.S. Forest Service Native Peoples and Climate Change Research Program and Team Leader for U.S. reporting to the International Convention on Temperate and Boreal Forests on the indicator addressing subsistence uses of forests. She has worked internationally in Mexico, Mongolia, Scotland, and several North American indigenous nations. She has co-authored over 50 publications, which take a political ecology approach to the study of non-timber forest products and related topics. Marla received her PhD in geography at Rutgers University with a dissertation focused on the role of NTFPs in household livelihoods in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. And Marla joins us now. Welcome, Marla.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. It's really a tremendous opportunity for me to be able to speak with people who are committed to urban food systems around the country. And I'm really looking forward to sharing with you some thoughts about how there's a whole suite of plant and mushroom species that can complement fruit trees and nut trees in as well as community gardens in urban food systems. And I also really look forward to hearing from all of you on the webinar through the two polls that are embedded in this talk. So Sarah, I am not immediately successful in advancing the slide. What do I need to do?
So you should have keyboard and mouse controls now. Oh, there you are.
There we go. Just a little delay maybe. So I'd like to start by telling a story that illustrates what I'm talking about here. The two ladies that you see on the left are Nepali Bhutanese refugees who were resettled in Syracuse, New York. And is frequently the case, as is frequently the case, the Nepali Bhutanese community, shortly after it arrived, was provided the opportunity to garden in some vacant land in the city, and they were provided with seeds for species that are commonly grown in American gardens. And that first summer, much effort went into planting tomatoes and cucumbers and other things, into watering and weeding and tending. And on a day that was about the time that people had planned to harvest tomatoes and cucumbers, they arrived in the gardens to find that they had all been stolen overnight. But these ladies were still able to go home with food for their families at the end of that day, because growing around the edges of their garden plot and in the vacant lot next door was an abundance of lamb's quarters, which you see the lady in front here holding. Lamb's quarters are known as betu in Nepali Bhutanese, and it is a central component of Nepali Bhutanese cuisine. So in this talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about urban ecosystems and foraging, and in particular, what counts as food, and where does food grow in a city, but also about the social systems associated with foraging. So in particular, who turns to urban nature for food, and what role does foraging have in food security and sovereignty? And the value, we think, of this work is in providing information that will help inform the management of urban green spaces for the production of food. My comments today are based on multi-city research that colleagues and I have been conducting since 2008. And here you see just a quick rundown of the numbers of species we've documented being harvested in various of the cities that we're working in. And we know that these are not exhaustive lists. So in order to see foraging as a component of urban food systems, you have to readjust your thinking a bit about what is it exactly that is food, that constitutes food. We know that there are over 200,000 species of plants in the world, and many more numbers of fungi. We're not sure how many. Thousands of these species are edible, and only a few hundred of them are cultivars, have entered, if you will, into that kind of a relationship with human beings. So what we're interested in here are those thousands of edibles that are not cultivars. So where might we find those foods growing in urban environments? Well, there are the places you would expect to find food in an urban context, like community orchards and yards and gardens. But what we find from our research is that there's also a host of places where you might not so much expect people to be sourcing food. And these include parks, that's perhaps more obvious, institutional campuses like universities and hospitals. Cemeteries get mentioned quite a lot, vacant lots. But in addition, just those in-between spaces, the edges of rights of way, chain link fences that divide one property from another property, basically any place that a plant or a mushroom can grow, somebody is likely sourcing food. Well, who is that somebody? Back in 2004, well before the Great Recession began, some colleagues and I conducted a telephone survey of the populations of Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And what we found is that 18% of the populations of those cities, that's nearly 1/5, say that they have done some foraging within the previous 5 years. And fully half of those people lived in cities. Now, we also analyzed the demographic characteristics of people who said that they forage. And what we found is that they pretty much parallel the demographic profiles of the populations of those states as a whole. So in terms of age, gender, although we have slightly more women reporting that they forage than men, but not a great difference. But in terms of age, gender, race, ethnicity, income, and educational attainment, again, we had slightly more people with higher levels of educational attainment reporting that they forage, but there's not a huge difference. What we can say is basically everybody, this is everybody, anybody might be foraging. But in saying that, we certainly don't want to suggest that the values and the meanings of foraging are the same for everybody. So, for example, some people who are foraging might be characterized as foodies. They're particularly easy to find because foodies are apt to do things like publish articles in Edible Manhattan about harvesting oyster mushrooms in Central Park. Maybe not strictly legal, but there it is in Edible Manhattan. There are lots of blogs about urban foraging. We also find from our interviews with people throughout several cities that when people are food insecure, when their food budget runs out, those who can may turn to the urban landscape seeking food to supplement their diets. Nature lovers are foragers because it connects them directly and intimately to the green world. And we will hear people waxing rhapsodic talking about how distraught they would be if they could not forage in urban environments, and about how doing this really gets them to look closely at the nature around them, even in a city. And then immigrants. We think we're seeing that foraging may be particularly important for people who are experiencing the food insecurity that frequently comes with being an immigrant or refugee, and with the tremendous social dislocations that come along with that experience as well. So clearly then, for at least some people, foraging is contributing to food security. It's contributing to food security when the market is not an option for them, either because they do not have the money or because the food that they are seeking is not to be had in a market. That means that the urban greenscape is serving as an ecological safety net for some people. It has a very low entry cost in terms of money, but a high entry cost in terms of the knowledge and the skill needed to do this.
Hi, Marla. This is Sarah. I just wanted to note that we do have some polls to.
That's right. Thank you so much for stopping me, Sarah.
Sure. So, for those listening, the first question on the poll, I'm not sure if you can see. Marla, would you mind reading that off?
Yeah. So what I'd be very interested to know, have you foraged in the last 12 months? So thank you very much for checking one of those two options, yes or no.
Sure. That poll would be open for another 5 seconds here. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll and view the results, share the results with everyone.
Great. So Sarah, shall I continue on, or are we waiting for poll results?
I think are we can I think we can click to share the results, and then we'll move on. We have one more poll that is relevant right here, and then we'll move forward.
Great. So have you foraged in the last 5 years? Thank you again for checking one of those two options, yes or no.
Okay, and we'll keep it open for another 5 seconds here. Wonderful. We're going to go ahead and close the poll.
All right. Okay, we good to go?
We are. Is everyone able to see the results? Are you able to see the results, Marla?
I am not.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and click to share the results then.
All right.
Hold on just a moment.
Aha! I had a suspicion I might be talking to a group of people who are foragers themselves.
Wonderful.
Great. Thank you. So you have likely then all heard of the term food sovereignty, and that is the capacity not just to have adequate calories and nutrients, but to have the food that is meaningful to you and your culture. So in a Native American context, this is often referred to as first foods, or traditional foods from any culture. This may be particularly important again for immigrants, but for anyone who retains a strong sense of family or cultural identity. Sarah, I think I might need I might need the mouse
Okay.
again.
All right, you should have it now. Wonderful. It looks like it's scrolling around now. You got it.
There we go. Great. All right. So food is very important in many cultural and spiritual observances, and foraging is one way for people to source food for cultural and spiritual observances, sometimes because the particular foods that are at the center of an observance may not commonly be available in, say, an American market, or sometimes because the ritual aspect of its use in a ceremony may require that it have been harvested and processed in a certain way, and foraging oneself or foraging by a member of the community gives people that level of control. So foraging contributes to the well-being of people then, both physically and emotionally. Physically, we know, for example, through recent studies, that a suite of 4 commonly foraged wild greens, including lamb's quarters, have levels of vitamins and micronutrients that are equal to or exceed those of many commonly available cultivar greens, such as spinach and kale. We also find through our research that foraging contributes to family cohesion, in particular, in addition to being the centerpieces of celebrations that bring families together. Older members of families often take younger members of families out together. Not only are they sharing the ecological knowledge that they have, but these are also often occasions for older people to tell stories about the place of origin to the younger members of their family. So what lessons then do I think that our research on foraging has or how does it speak to the community orchards movement? And how can foraging perhaps be complementary to the community orchard movement? One way, I think, is to point out that there's food in every story of the urban forest. And by that I mean every structural story, the overstory, the understory, the ground floor, but also the human stories of urban forests. And there's food in every season. Things that can be foraged tend to be available many weeks earlier than cultivars are available for eating in the spring, and many weeks later in the autumn than cultivars are available. And even in northern New England here, there are a few forageable species which are available through the winter. Not many, but a few. Many of these, most of these species really are spontaneous. That is to say, they don't take any additional effort on anyone's part. They're just there on the landscape. But it's also possible to design urban foodscapes in ways that are have low resource requirements in terms of both funding and human labor. And one of those is the concept of zoochory. That is taking advantage of wildlife behavior to help plant what you want to have planted. So for example, if you wanted wild grapes, you could put a couple of plants of wild grapes around, and then you could put bird perches in other spots where you might like wild grapes, and the birds will do the rest of the work for you. In terms of social benefits and aspects of urban foraging, foraging clearly has opportunities for helping to sustain bodies and cultures. But there are also some significant challenges here. I don't want to gloss over that. There are challenges in terms of governance. Who has the rights to harvest what where? And in fact, throughout the United States in general, municipal laws, city laws, actually formally make foraging illegal. There are also questions of sustainability when we're talking about a practice where there are so many people and relatively little green space. And then finally, while there are clear health benefits from foraging and consuming wild foods, there is also risk from the uptake of contaminants from soil and their deposition through the air. So just to quickly recap, some of the ways that I think foraging can speak to urban orchards, community orchards, including foraging within the suite of activities that take place in a community orchard can help to diversify the food species and sources. It can help to extend the harvest season. It's a multicultural activity, so it can expand the faces and the languages that are present in the space. And it also presents us with, I think, a very compelling new yardstick for measuring the health of urban ecosystems. And that is, are these places that are safe to eat from? So I want to thank you very much for your time, and we have another couple polls I'd be very grateful if you would participate in. Thank you. So does your orchard allow foraging other than fruit picking? Thanks for answering yes or no.
We will go ahead and allow that poll to be open another 5 seconds. Okay, and the poll will be closed. We'll go ahead and share those results with you.
All right, so 40% of you do. That's interesting. And I'd love to hear more if there's an opportunity to do that somehow.
Yes, please follow up with Marla and with the entire Community Orchard Network in our Google group after the session.
Does your orchard encourage foraging other than fruit picking?
All right, and we have 5 more seconds.
Fifty-fifty on that one. All right. And then finally, would your orchard be interested in more information about foraging?
Okay, a few more seconds here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, for starting a Google group. It sounds like we've got a conversation to have here. Really looking forward to that.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marla, for a fantastic presentation about the cross section of policy and foraging, and who's looking to forage, who's already involved with foraging. We're so excited to learn more and learn about some other local examples happening in Pittsburgh with our next presenter. But before we get to Rose, if anyone has any questions for Marla, please type them in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will go ahead and answer those accordingly. So we have some questions coming in. One of the first questions is, how do you find out about foraging efforts that are happening? So I guess you've done some research, Marla, on these efforts. Is there some kind of foraging network at all, or how do you find out that these activities are going on?
That's a great question. It's like the species that the plant materials and mushrooms that people are foraging for, it's a very dispersed activity. It's very dispersed socially as well as physically. So as I said during the talk, foodies are relatively easy to find and find out about. There are meetup groups all over the United States that are focused on foraging. So for example, in Philadelphia, there's the Wild Foodies of Philly. And those meetup groups exist in several places. There are any number of blogs that are providing back and forth. So the New York Times City Desk has a blogger named Ava Chin who blogs regularly about foraging, I think bi-weekly, about foraging in New York City, and that generates a lot of conversation. Increasingly, people are offering tours teaching urban foraging in cities around the country. We find we have to put our own boots on the ground, though, to find others who might be foraging. So, for example, right now, I and a colleague have been looking at foraging by the Mexican and Mexican American communities of New York City, and we've just completed a study of foraging by the Chinese and Chinese American communities of New York City. And there, what we did was start from community centers that are the focus of activity in those communities, mm-hmm. and ask the directors if we could have permission to come in and offer a talk, to offer programs, to talk to people who come into their community center regularly, and that's proven to be quite effective. And we're about to begin a similar effort in Baltimore with Spanish speakers who will be primarily from Mexico and Central America. You see some pictures just sliding by here of foraging in urban environments.
Wonderful. The next question coming in is about policies. So how is it best to find out if policies exist against urban foraging? I mean, you mentioned that while this kind of activity is not always legal, it is happening. What's the best way to figure out the legal constraints in your area?
Yeah, so there are really two main sources for that. Uh, One is going to be finding out what the official policies are with regards to foraging in parks. And that might mean you may have a mix of city, county, federal, state parks in your area. So you might have to check with all of those sources. And then there are the laws that apply to trespass, essentially, on private property. And that is primarily what will apply in terms of the formal legal terms under which foraging occurs. And it's quite interesting. There really is a patchwork around that. So, for example, the organization Fallen Fruit in Los Angeles relies on the fact that municipal law in the city and county of Los Angeles says that produce that is overhanging public rights of way is open access. And so anyone can harvest it. But I will add to this that what we find, because we've also been interviewing public land managers, is that there are the formal rules on the book, and then there's what actually happens. There's informal governance as well. And in many cases, that varies depending upon the species that's being foraged. Usually people don't mind if you're picking the dandelions. But sadly, the identity of the person who is foraging also clearly affects how the rules are actually enforced. So people who parks personnel deem to be somehow, they don't look like they belong, or they don't seem to be doing kind of the normal thing, seems to affect how rules are actually enforced. So it's a complex network out there, but if you want to know just what the laws on the books are, find out what they are in the parks, find out what they are with regards to trespass on privately owned land.
Wonderful. And one last question before we move forward. We had a question come in about fruit and edibles being tested for contamination. Many cities have, issues with contaminated land and land that maybe has been redeveloped into parks and into green space because of contamination. Do you know of anybody who is actively testing fruit from urban trees for contamination?
Oh, what a great question. I don't know of anyone who's actively testing, say, orchard fruit, although I'm sure it must be going on. But I am personally involved with two efforts to test foraged plant materials from urban environments for contamination. And some of those are fruits, so for example, berries. One at Johns Hopkins, looking at wild produce from that city, and the other in Chicago, looking at wild produce from a particular park in the city of Chicago. We don't have final results yet, but I will say that my colleagues at Johns Hopkins previously have done work looking at exposure to contaminants in urban community gardens. And what they found is that the primary exposure to contaminants in urban community gardens came from inhaling or ingesting the soil. Not from the plant materials,
Interesting.
but from actually ingesting soil. So where you're talking about produce that doesn't involve getting your hands down into the soil, disturbing the soil, perhaps risk of exposure to at least the contaminants they were looking at is minimal. But stay tuned for more complete results on that one.
Well, we look forward to those, and we look forward to sharing those within the Google group. Thanks so much, Marla.
My pleasure.
We'll talk with you at the end of the session. Our next presenter is presenting from experience in Pittsburgh. Rose Schmakowski possesses a Bachelor of Arts degree in Environmental Science from Chatham University and has worked with several Pittsburgh environmental organizations and community groups during the past 5 years, including Tree Pittsburgh, G-Tech Strategies, Pittsburgh Poultry People, and Pittsburgh Botanic Garden. She completed the AmeriCorps Public Allies program with over 1,700 hours of service, and her most recent endeavor brought her here today and has been launching Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh, which is an organization that connects private landowners, volunteer foragers, and food pantries to be able to harvest food on private property. And Rose joins us now. Welcome, Rose. You should have the keyboard controls.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Schmakowski, and I am one of the co-founders of Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh. Oh, here we go. Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh is a 100% voluntarily run, fiscally sponsored project whose mission is to rescue surplus fresh food from privately owned fruit and nut trees to provide fresh food options for local food agencies, organizations, and community groups with individuals in need. Our primary goals are to reduce food waste and increase local food security in the city of Pittsburgh. And our secondary goals are to connect with tree owners who are interested and share with them basic information on tree care, excuse me, so as to increase the health and longevity of their trees. During my talk today, I will be sharing about the development of Pittsburgh's very own fruit and nut tree harvesting program, how the project works, and what our successes and challenges have been within the last 10 months of our launch. So this project started during the summer of 2013. My now project partner, Carolyn Barber, approached me and asked me if I knew of any fruit or nut tree harvesting programs in the city of Pittsburgh. Carolyn explained to me that she had a very prolific mulberry tree in her backyard and that she had noticed many fruit trees in her neighborhood. Having worked with several environmental organizations and being a Pittsburgh native myself, I thought hard before answering. I could think of no organizations in the city that was specifically harvesting from trees. Planting trees, yes. Harvesting trees, not so much. Carolyn shared with me that in her native city, Toronto, a friend of hers named Laura Rainsborough had started a successful fruit harvesting project called Not Far from the Tree. After my conversation with Carolyn, I was inspired to look further into finding out if anyone was harvesting fruit and nut trees in Pittsburgh. My search results turned up nothing. When Carolyn and I met again, we began brainstorming and dreaming about a fruit and nut tree harvesting project in Pittsburgh. We did further research to see if anyone in the United States was also harvesting and donating fruits and nuts from privately owned trees, and we did find similar organizations, such as the Harvest Club in Orange County, California, who has harvested nearly 16,000 pounds of produce since 2009. Foraged Feast in Denver harvested over 57,000 pounds of food in their first year alone. Concrete Jungle in Atlanta, Georgia has harvested nearly 17,000 pounds of produce since 2009. And the Baltimore Orchard Project has nearly harvested 10,000 pounds of produce in just the past 3 years. With examples of successful tree harvesting programs, Carolyn and I began to feel more confident about launching what we would call Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh. We saw the potential of a successful program in Pittsburgh. Walking through our neighborhoods with our eyes searching for hidden harvests, Carolyn and I spotted several types of edibles, including apples, pears, figs, and mulberry in people's yards. We even began to identify lesser eaten edibles such as acorns and ginkgo. We were becoming convinced that this idea had a real shot of making an impact in Pittsburgh. Nearly a year later, in June 2014, we unveiled Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh to our larger community at the AmeriCorps Public Allies Leadership Conference. From there, we received a slew of media coverage, including 2 articles in the city paper and 1 article in local Pittsburgh. We were astounded by the interest around this project. Before we even harvested anything, we were receiving unsolicited but very welcomed media coverage. The excitement felt like a fever and the pressure was on. We held our first harvest in September of last year with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette present. So how does Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh work? Well, we have private fruit and nut tree owners or individuals who are aware of a fruit or nut tree in the city, and they are able to go online to our website and register fruit and nut trees that they own or have found. We then connect with the tree owner or individual and do a property and tree assessment. We check to see if the fruits or nuts in question are ready to be harvested, and we take note on any situations on the property that may be dangerous to ourselves or volunteer harvesters, such as dangerous slopes or potentially aggressive animals. At these site visits, we determine how many volunteers and how much equipment we'll need to complete a harvest. We then email all of our registered volunteer harvesters, and if all of our volunteer slots are not filled, we share the harvest opportunity on our social media pages, Facebook and Twitter. At the end of harvest, we sort through our picks and determine which fruits or nuts are in good enough condition for eating and which may be better off in the compost pile. We then weigh the amount of edible fruits, record the weight, and divide the best of the produce 3 ways. We allow the tree owner to take up to 1/3 of the harvest. We find that they typically take less. We allow volunteers to take 1/3 of the harvest to divide among themselves, and then at least 1/3 of the pick is set aside for donation. All of the food we pick is donated to an organization in the neighborhood we have harvested in. So for example, if we harvest a tree in the Highland Park neighborhood, we donate to an organization in the Highland Park neighborhood. We try our best to keep the food as local as possible. Rotten or pest and or disease-ridden fruits and nuts are then composted. This past fall, we also donated any rotten fruits, not quite good enough for donation, but not quite so rotten that they couldn't still be used, to a group in our community that calls themselves A Few Bad Apples. And they pressed our apples and some of our pears into cider for us. 100% of the produce from our harvest during our first harvest season have been put to use in some way. So what are the benefits to this program? Reducing food waste. First and foremost, we are reducing food waste. We are taking a valuable resource and we are putting it to use. We are utilizing resources that have been long overlooked in our city. We are providing a fresh food option. We are connecting individuals who are in need with produce. Oftentimes, food pantries, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, they're providing their patrons with packaged food goods. The produce we donate to these organizations allows hungry people a fresh food option for free. In addition, sharing with volunteers allows those in need to access the produce without going to the food bank. There's room for educational opportunities. We have been looking into working with schools so that children may have the opportunity to learn how fruits and nuts are grown by participating in a harvest. In addition, we have been working with the intention to eventually make schools a recipient of some of our harvests. And we even have an event planned for early this spring to do a mulberry harvest with Food Revolution in one of the local schools in our area. Building community. We are building community by connecting tree owners to volunteers and organizations in their neighborhoods. And finally, tree care. Outside interest encourages tree owners to take a vested interest in the health of their trees. We hope that with our program, we are able to spark an interest in privately owned fruit and nut tree owners to take a closer look and realize how special owning a fruit or nut tree really is. Challenges. In complete honesty, we have faced many challenges with this project and have oftentimes had to go back and reevaluate our goals and plans. Challenges that we have faced include determining our project scope. So, for example, did we just want to harvest trees, or did we also want to harvest gardens? We decided on just harvesting trees. Woman and manpower. Currently, the demand and interest in our program exceeds Carolyn and I's physical and temporal capabilities alone. We have been approached by multiple food agencies, schools, and other organizations. We have even been solicited for internships that we are currently not able to provide. And also coordinating harvests. There are more trees to harvest than we could possibly do ourselves. So in response to this, we are advocating for individuals in the community to please join us. You are able, and we encourage you to please take a leadership role in this program by volunteering to be what we call a harvest leader or a property scout. Cost has been a challenge. Orchard ladders, fruit pickers, gas mileage, vehicle wear and tear, it all adds up. Some of the solutions we have implemented have been borrowing equipment from family and friends. We have also created a tab on our webpage where individuals can sign up to lend us equipment for harvest in their neighborhood. Tree health. A lot of the trees that we are harvesting from have been long neglected. They're in need of some serious pruning. They have pest and disease issues. They have fungal problems. All of this impacts the total crop. And lastly, misinterpretation. We have struggled quite a bit with misinterpretation. We are not a registered 501c3 organization. We do not have staff. We are totally voluntarily run. And sometimes, due to the misinterpretation, the public has expectations of us that we're not just quite able to live up to yet, but we hope to get there. Sarah, I think
Are you able to move forward? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So in spite of these challenges, we have faced some great success in the last 10 months, just 10 months. We've had lots of media coverage. We've had a great amount of interest and demand. We were able to harvest 500 pounds within 60 days. We've had 66 trees registered. We've had 32 registered volunteers. We've been able to donate to 2 different centers, and we became members of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. In addition, we acquired fiscal sponsorship from an organization called New Sun Rising in Pittsburgh. Forward. Thank you. Our goal for the 2015 year is to double last year's impact and harvest 1,000 pounds of produce. We're trying to be realistic about our abilities given the resources and the amount of man and woman power we currently have. We're looking forward to seeing this project grow. I want to thank you so much for your time, and I hope that the story of Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh inspires you to start a similar organization in your community.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rose, for those wonderful, wonderful reflections. Even
You're very welcome.
just in just 10 months, this is unbelievable how much momentum you've been able to acquire, and notoriety, and just excitement around the movement. So if you have a question for Rose, please type it in the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. We have a first question has just come in to kind of go a little bit deeper in on one of your challenges that you mentioned, which was talking about the misinterpretation about expectations from the public. Would you mind going in a little bit more detail about some of those expectations from the public and how your organization may not have the capacity just yet to meet those?
Sure. So I think that there's just a bit of misinterpretation. Maybe it's the way that we present ourselves online. But we're often, we receive emails from people, tree registrations from homeowners, and sometimes they expect immediate responses. And we kind of call ourselves weekend warriors. We've had jobs and other things going on in our lives, so sometimes we just deal with sort of there's this. It feels to us that we're viewed as sort of this fully functioning organization, and we would love to be there someday, hopefully soon, but we're just not there yet. We're not even in our first full year. We're still growing. So those are some of the challenges that we're facing. Is, we've had students emailing us and asking us for internships. We would love to give them internships, but we're just not able to do that at this time. So we have made an effort to be a little bit more clear and forward about the fact that we are 100% voluntarily run, and we're just trying to push for more community involvement to really help us, meet this demand and make this project as successful as we know it can be, just based off of the other examples that we've seen happening all across the country.
Definitely. We have, and we wish you continued growth, and I know that we'll be able to all connect with Rose offline in the Google group as well, because I'm sure that other folks have maybe experienced this as well, this rapid growth. We have some other questions coming in about the Greater Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh Network. A couple questions about if you've connected with the local Pittsburgh Arborist Association, or if you've looked into working with colleges and local universities in the area to increase the amount of volunteers you have. What does the Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh Network look like right now?
The Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh Network right now looks like just private homeowners, volunteers. We also are members of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, so we've been trying to tap into our resources there just to make connections and find partners. Food banks, food pantries, the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank we've been in contact with. We're working with Food Revolution this spring. We had the idea of reaching out to real estate agencies and connecting with them, and this is an idea that someone in California shared with us, was to connect with real estate agencies and ask them if they were willing to share with homeowners who may be, or interested potential homeowners who are looking at buying a house, if there's a fruit tree in their yard, just sharing with them, like, hey, there's this organization called Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh. You can, if you donate your fruit, you can write it off as a tax write-off. We would love to work with the colleges. Definitely, there's so much room to grow. It's really just a matter of time and ability right now, and we're slowly getting there, and we're growing pretty quickly, and we're just taking every opportunity that comes our way.
Excellent. And just one final question before we wrap up here. We have a couple of questions coming in about liability, right? So you're on private property, you have volunteers coming in. How do you address liability issues?
That is a great question, and that was one of our first questions as well. Especially, I've experienced doing a lot of volunteer coordinating an organization with my past work experiences. So liability was a huge concern. How do we protect us? How do we protect the homeowners? And how do we protect the volunteers? What we have implemented is we have a waiver that volunteers sign that releases ourselves and the homeowner from all liability. We have a waiver that the homeowner signs that releases us and also the volunteers from liability. And we also have purchased liability insurance through New Sun Rising NSR, our fiscal sponsor. So that is how we are addressing the concern of liability.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and bring Marla back in here. Marla, do you have any other reflections on Marla and Rose? If you both have any other reflections and ideas or requests or anything from anyone on the line, feel free to share them with us now.
Well, thank you. I'm just really excited to hear about Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh and how that has developed. And um, clearly, mission creep is a danger for a fledgling organization. So thinking about adding something additional into it is maybe not a kindness, but I don't know, Rose, how would you see foraging fitting in or not into Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh?
I think foraging can totally fit into Hidden Harvest Pittsburgh. We have a great platform opportunity to share with the general public about different kinds of edibles that are out there. You know, for example, like acorns. People don't really think about acorns. You can turn them into flour. You can make them into bread. Ginkgo. We came upon a Chinese couple in one of the parks that was harvesting ginkgo, and we learned from them that you can turn them into truffles. You can't eat a whole lot of them, but you can. So we found wild raspberry along the trail. There's so much opportunity to sort of expand this in terms of like educational opportunity, looking at what other edibles are out there, really helping to unveil these hidden harvests. In terms of feasibility with donating those foods, that may not be quite as possible because when we're looking at donations, we're talking about large quantities of food. We get between 150 to 200 pounds of produce from an apple or a pear tree alone. Wow. But there is definitely urban foraging can fit into the hidden harvest, model. It's totally possible.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both to our excellent presenters, Marla and Rose. We look forward to continuing the conversation in the Google group. All of the unanswered questions have been saved, and we will go ahead and post them in the Google group for the presenters to follow up on. Thank you all so much for attending this, our very third Community Orchard Network webcast. Stay tuned. You'll all be joined to the Google group, and we look forward to talking with you next month when we talk about how to maximize your orchard output, and we talk about how to manage pests and disease through holistic orchard sprays. So if you'd like to present on one of our monthly webcasts, please contact us at orchard@actrees.org. And thanks again. We look forward to seeing you next month. It's the last Tuesday of the month, so all right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.